Partisan gerrymandering was known in the colonies prior to independence, and the framers were familiar with it at the time of drafting and ratification of the Constitution. So what I try to tell everybody, it's legal, it's following the law, and there's nothing wrong with being partisan. That's what it says. The U.S. Supreme Court ruled with us. But it is very important. And I'll tell you another reason it's important. This week, we got data on pre-census information. They are saying that Texas, in the next census, could gain 4 more congressional seats.
Wow.
And California loses them.
Ready to roll?
Yep.
All right.
Real Texan.
Why should this matter to Real Texans? Hey, welcome to this edition of Real Texans, visiting with folks who are impacting the Lone Star State. Sitting here with State Representative Todd Hunter of Corpus Christi. Thanks for letting me invade your office today.
Absolutely. Glad you're here. Welcome to the coast.
I appreciate that. Okay, you are one of those guys who falls in the category of not from Texas, but got here really quickly. Okay.
Yeah, I think I paid, born, and married everybody here since. No, you're right. My parents were from Kansas.
Right.
And my dad worked for Phillips 66, so I was born in Myrtlesville, Oklahoma. But I grew up and I've lived in Houston, went to law school and SMU in Dallas. And I've been in Corpus Christi since 1978. So I've got 5 grandkids, 1 on the way, 3 kids, and a wife and 2 sister-in-laws that make sure they know that I'm now invested.
Okay, so I would like to know, what was it that attracted, and my gut is the answer is a job, but what is that attracted you to Corpus Christi? And you lived, sure, a lot of different places. You were in law school in Dallas. Why come to Corpus Christi in 1978?
So in 1978, when I was in law school, as you said, you interview different groups. And I was invited by a law firm to come to Corpus Christi. And I came down and I thought, I just want to be by the ocean.
Oh.
So I chose the coast. And I've been here ever since 1978. But it was really to pick the location. Mm-hmm. And it was a great, great decision. And I'm still here. And it's been great to see everybody change, developed, and seeing how things are going.
You practice outside being a legislator, your real job is to practice law, civil defense work.
Correct.
Explain what that is.
Sure. So everybody knows in the practice, and it's a little bit different today.
Right.
There's not as many, we didn't have a lot of virtual trials when I was coming into the practice of law. Today, you have the plaintiff bar that files suit, mm-hmm. the defense bar that defends. However, in commercial litigation, that's sometimes a little hazy because the defense can file the lawsuit and the plaintiff can defend it. But my background was defending basically business in the state of Texas.
Right.
And so I had a lot of litigation experience and have done a lot of trial work in Texas, but that's kind of the different type of approach.
The tort environment in Texas, when you came into as a lawyer, was one very hostile.
Yes.
Business.
Yes.
And that has definitely changed in the intervening.
Absolutely. And it's a good point. When I started for practicing law, I mean, there were lots of lawsuits and litigation was pretty prevalent. Through the years, Texas has been very pro-business, and what we got to do is make sure we are being pro-business. But today, I wouldn't say it's as litigious as it was back in those late 70s and 80s, but it gave me a lot of experience, and I'm glad I got it.
So you've done two two sections, if you will, of the legislature.
Correct.
Two different back and forths. The first time, late 80s, early 90s, actually the late 90s, as a Democrat, and then in the early 10s through today as a Republican.
Correct.
I want to talk about some stuff you've been most recently more known for. I do have to ask. I visited with Eric Johnson recently, the mayor of Dallas. Who has switched from the Democratic Party to the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
You made that switch quite a bit earlier than he did. But tell me about why you switched parties. What was the drove?
It's a good question, because when I was growing up, my dad was a Republican county chairman.
How funny. So
And
the man in black was a black
you better
sheep,
believe
I
it.
guess. Yeah.
And I got involved in politics in the Goldwater LBJ election.
Okay.
And so my father taught me what we call retail politics, taught me how to put up signs, block walk, move around, talk to folks. And so I learned from him. I got involved in teenage Republican politics. When I moved to the South Texas region in 1978, it was different because there wasn't a large Republican Party at the time. And it was kind of what I call urban Democrats and non-urban.
Right.
And if I remember, Lloyd Benson was the U.S. Senator. And it was kind of interesting watching. I was going to be, I think, Chamber of Commerce president here. And a group came and talked with me, locals that I knew, families. And so I said that I would run. At that time, it was completely different today. But the idea was in the South Texas region that you would need to run as a Democrat. What was interesting is I served 8 years. I chose to take a break.
Right.
One of my reasons, my children were 1 and 2 when I ran, and then my daughter was born when I was in session. But I will tell you, during those 8 years, I started seeing the party, the Democrat Party, move to taxing and going to bigger government. Now, after 8 years, I chose, because I went home to be a parent, because you can always run for office. And during the 11 years after, this is probably the best thing that's ever happened to me. I got to live under the laws I passed. And you get to talk to people. And, I learned a lot from my father, the county chairman. And so through those 11 years, I got more involved. The Republican Party was expanding. It was coming in to most of the state of Texas. I'm very, very pro-Texas oil and gas. And we watched it. And so I started working with the Republican Party in probably the mid-90s.
Right.
And then I ran in 2008 as a Republican.
Against an incumbent Democrat.
Absolutely, who was supported by the Obama administration.
Right.
And it was very, very, very expensive race. And, but we were able to get the community. You saw the trends coming in to Texas. And, I've been in both spots, but today the growth is coming. For many, many years, I was your only Republican in South Texas.
Right.
And now it's getting crowded, as I tell everybody. And we have new Republicans coming in from a local and a state. But that was the transition. And it's been a very good education process. But South Texas is now different than it was, because now the trend has gone Republican.
It's very fascinating to look at how quickly the Democratic Party changed. I think back to 1988, one of the top five most conservative members of U.S. Congress was then Democrat Ralph Hall of Texas.
That's right.
And today, well, of course, he's passed away. But, Ralph Hall then, as a Republican, was one of the most conservative Republicans. The party shifted in a massive way in a very short amount of time. Does it surprise you how much the party shifted? I mean, it'd be hard for a conservative can't get elected as a Democrat.
To me, today, I believe there's too much outside Texas interest trying to impact policy. And I think Republican Party has done a good job by focusing on Texas issues. Mm-hmm. And I think the other thing about South Texas is growing. There's economy down here now.
Right.
And so everybody now looks at issues with not only a personal, but a business. But it has changed. So historically, I've seen it one way and I've seen a shift to another. And you're correct, but South Texas is now becoming an economic engine.
You have, for better, for worse, maybe you can tell me, become, in a way, the face of redistricting.
That is correct.
I think 2021, you led that on the legislative end.
That's correct.
Being in charge, kind of shepherding the legislation through. Why is redistricting important? A lot of times, I think for most of us, when we hear redistricting, it's cast as something bunching up next to a slur. Maybe an unpleasant word you shouldn't say in polite company. Why is redistricting important?
I've been, as you said, involved in redistricting. 2021, I was the chairman, and I filed the bill.
Right.
And then in 2025, we had another chairman, but I filed the bill. And I've argued both bills during that time. Why is it important? Because it impacts who represents you. And what a lot of people don't know, it's the state legislature who redistricts Congress, state Senate, state representatives, and state board of education. Mm-hmm. And it is important because, in my opinion, since 2024, your trend has become Republican political performance. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And yet the redistricting was going the other way.
Right.
And so the U.S. Supreme Court has said there's nothing wrong with redistricting basing on political performance. So it's important because the reflection of your state and the growth, redistricting follows that. A lot of people get frustrated. I will tell you, I sometimes tease everybody that I think redistricting is a lawyer annuity plan, is what it is. But I try to be fair, but I'm going to be open. There's nothing wrong with drawing political performance.
Right.
And that was what I stated. Some don't like it, but that's the law.
And look, if we're supposed to have a representative government, I mean, that's what we like to pretend anyway.
That's correct.
That's the joke, right? Well, you're representative government. If you're going to actually have that means you have to make sure that the districts are set up in a way that they do represent.
That is correct. That is absolute. A lot of people talk about gerrymandering, and that's really inaccurate. Mm-hmm. Gerrymandering was a term that is developed up in case law and law. And I brought this today. This is the Supreme Court of the United States Rucho case. And what I want people to know is, and I read this on the House floor, partisan gerrymandering was known in the colonies prior to independence, and the framers were familiar with it at the time of drafting and ratification of the Constitution. So what I try to tell everybody, it's legal, mm-hmm. It's following the law, and there's nothing wrong with being partisan. Mm-hmm. That's what it says. Now, did I get criticism? Absolutely. But the U.S. Supreme Court ruled with us. But it is very important. And I'll tell you another reason it's important. This week, we got data on pre-census information. They are saying that Texas, in the next census, could gain 4 more congressional seats.
Wow.
And California loses them. So we are going just like this And by the way, they're in the second place one.
Yeah.
We're the biggest one. So the growth, the trends, and being here where you are, South Texas, we're seeing a new landscape change.
It's been fascinating to me, particularly since the 2025 redistricting, listening to the arguments, listening to the court case out in El Paso where you were testified, that there's this push to say, well, districts have to be drawn based on this. This is your opposition. Districts need to be drawn based on how people look, rather than what you were pushing was drawing them based on what they believe. And if we're a nation of ideas, shouldn't ideas and beliefs trump those other characteristics?
Absolutely. And let me quote the U.S. Supreme Court again. To hold that legislators cannot take their partisan interests into account when drawing district lines would essentially countermand the framers' decision to entrust districting to political entities. The bottom line is political performance and partisanship is allowed. Right. The United States Supreme Court said that in Rucho. They just recently said it in December.
Right.
If you're the opposition, I get it. You don't like it. But we followed the law and we were approved by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I was honest. I told everybody exactly what it is. And that's how we're doing these congressional right now, which we're in the March primaries, getting ready to see this.
Right.
And everybody needs to know there are other redistricting cases now going to the U.S. Supreme Court that could change things even more, which could happen this late spring.
There's been some kind of quiet discussions, in some cases not so quiet, but conversations about, not with the Pettigrew decision that was kind of in some ways the impetus for 2025's effort, maybe next year, 2027, taking another look at maybe our state house and state senate districts, taking a look at state board of education. Is that something you're at all interested in? What's your thoughts?
So the Pettaway case, which is U.S. Fifth Circuit, hit the other element that you just mentioned in redistricting, and I want everybody to know it says we conclude that coalition claims do not comport with Section 2 of the Voting Rights statutory language or with Supreme Court cases interpreting. So you're correct. You have a U.S. Supreme Court, United States Fifth Circuit, that has set a new body of law.
Right.
And one of the frustration, I've seen it because I'm one of the senior members, this isn't the 1960s anymore. This isn't the 1970s anymore. This isn't the 1980s anymore. And law is changing. Political performance is changing. And law is ever changing. There's nothing wrong with taking those elements in to current law. Now, what happens in 2027? There is discussion a lot through the grassroots.
Mm-hmm.
Should we take a look at this again? I think a lot will be determined in this U.S. Supreme Court. I think it's the Louisiana case.
I think that's right, yes, sir.
And we'll see how that's ruled. I think they had an en banc hearing in October, and I think we have to see what happens in June. Now, whether we take redistricting up or not, that's out of my hands, but that could spark the discussion.
It feels like, particularly in something you mentioned a moment ago that kind of blew my mind, that Texas is getting 4 additional congressional seats possibly after the next census. What that really means is that there are lots of people moving to Texas.
Absolutely.
And you just kind of look at the home building, everything else. And that in some ways it kind of screams, well, if you've got these population shifts, you need to be looking at the districts. Otherwise, you have people who are literally being denied representation because they're not being included in the conversations.
One of the posts I read earlier this week says population of Texas per U.S. Census Bureau, the pre-count this week is 31,709,821, as the quote goes, once again, by a mile, more new residents year over year than any other state.
Wow.
So your trend is going to be looking at the issue. Absolutely.
Yeah. We're hitting, as you noted, we're hitting into the primaries, which means there'll be runoffs, and you've got municipal elections. And because you've been so involved in kind of all in the space, why are primaries important? Why are these local government races important? Why should folks take the time to learn about the candidates and get involved?
First, it's very important to get your voters out.
Saw that in SD9.
We've seen this. And by the way, as a note on that, I look at that as a preparation call.
Yeah.
And I look at it as we can prepare for that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But primaries are very important for these reasons. One, primaries basically crystallize the issue.
Mm-hmm.
Your party, your grassroots, the debate crystallize. It also shows the stark difference between the two parties. And so it's very important. I want to see a good turnout in my area in South Texas in the primary, because that attracts other voters to follow us. So primaries are very important. But you hit the other one that we sometimes forget. In my area, city council and school board are on the same day as the general election.
Right.
And whether we want to accept it or not, Republicans are running and the opposite party is running. And you've got to look at the candidates now when they run. And city council controls fiscal responsibility at the local level. School boards, we talk about property taxes, that'll be an issue next session, can impact that. So primaries, the local elections, big. And it crystallizes the issues. And I think the good thing about it, it shows this position versus this position.
Right.
Because in this day and age, you can talk a lot, but it's the action that is taken. And that's the key. So no, very, very important. And voter turnout, you go back to redistricting, it's important that Republicans vote and vote big, because that helps you justify in the redistricting process.
Outstanding. Well, Representative Todd Hunter, thank you so much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you. It's great to see you.
And thank you for joining us for this edition of Real Texans.